Come, spell weavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and tonight it is just going to be me, just me talking to you guys. And the topic tonight is something that came across my desk this weekend, something that I saw watching YouTube videos. And it is the most recent Designing the Game video from MCDM, talking about the changes made to basically the attack roll. So it's now called the power roll. We're going to be talking all about what that means. We'll be watching the video and kind of going through my thoughts on this particular mechanic. There's a lot to talk about here. And there's a lot of different places where we can get stuck into this. But before we get started, I want to remind everyone to like, share, and subscribe. This is the best way to let people know what we're doing out here. Just kind of get that organic growth out there for Rollin Bones. And I appreciate those of you who have done so in the past. We are at 1,000 subscribers. That's great. Let's keep them moving. And I also want to remind everyone that you can find me on various social media platforms, including X and Instagram, where I am at Howard_Ryan Gregg. YouTube is Rollin Bones. Twitch, if you are so inclined, is twitch.tv/RollinBonesRyan. And Substack is rollinbones.substack.com. Substack is the place you go to if you want to hear a lot of my thoughts on role-playing games in article form and kind of longer form. It's a little bit different than what I do here. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder whether or not I'm a better writer than podcaster. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll ask someone that difficult question and see what the answer is. But anyway, that's where you can find me. Kickstarter is over right now. Thank you to those of you who supported that. We are currently working on getting surveys out and stuff like that. So those of you who are waiting to send information to us about, drive-through RPG email address, or those of you who are getting your likeness put into the artwork for Corpse Walk or His Heinous Harvest, that email will be coming. So, stay tuned. Be on the lookout for that. Anyway, if you use Google Docs, you're not a better writer. All right, fine, whatever. Okay. Even though I just switched to LibreOffice because I was bullied into it, fine. All right. Anyway, let's get on to tonight's topic, and that is, of course, this most recent video on the power roll. However, before we get into that, there's something that I want to do, and I'm going back to something that Crafty and Malachi and I talked about all the way back in December when we first brought up MCDM on this channel. this was something that at the time seemed like a nitpick. It was something I didn't want to harp on too much because there were other things to talk about. There were concerns around basically how soon Koville went to, crowdfunding with this project, considering that it's not even written at this point. There's still major revisions going on. There's still playtesting going on. There's all kinds of stuff. There's not a draft of this game right now. There are rules that people are using to kind of run the game, but there's not even like quick start rules. Everything's still in flux right now. And that's kind of my problem with the Kickstarter side of things. And just to clarify, for those of you who are more on the Koville supporter side, who are maybe watching this to get an alternate perspective, I don't think that Matt Koville is grifting. I don't think this is a scam. I think Matt Koville has bitten off more than he can chew. I think he's someone who has gotten by on his force of personality and his showmanship for quite a long time. But the fact of the matter is he is an idea guy first and foremost, and he's got grand visions of how things might work. He does not have I'd say the talent to actually carry these things forward. And you can see this in the games that he's worked on, the video games that he's worked on. The biggest one that comes to mind for me is Evolve. Now, I know that he was a writer on that. He wasn't necessarily a programmer. But Evolve was a project that had big ideas and, at the end of the day, really poor execution. It didn't come together in the end. It did not end up being the thing that was promised to the players, and it died a painful, slow, horrible death because of it. So now we see this kind of carry over into Matt Koville's RPG work. Tora here in chat, Matt Koville has consumed his own Kool-Aid too long. I would agree with that. And I also agree with what Malachi is saying here. He's trying to bring video game ideas to tabletop role-playing games. And while there are things that the two mediums can teach each other, I think what Matt Koville is doing here is a mistake. But anyway, with that said, let's take a look at one of the videos. This is months old at this point. This was one that we covered back when Crafty and Malachi were on the show. But this is the video where Matt Koville talks about weapons. And this, I want to start here for a reason, which I will elucidate here in just a second. So let's watch this very brief clip.
We never liked the idea that your choice of weapon determined how much damage you did. For one thing, mundane weapons do not impart force all by themselves. It is your muscles doing the actual work. So your stats should be the primary determining factor. But choice of weapon should still do something, right? But also, the way D20 Fantasy does weapons and armor, it forces players into two groups. In one group are players who have an idea, maybe an image, maybe just a vibe of the character they want to play. And they see the list of weapons as a way to capture that. These folks tend to assume that since there is a big list of weapons, and it's a fighting monsters game, the dev team have made sure that they can pick whichever weapon they think is cool, whichever weapons fit their fantasy or archetype or vibe, and they will have fun. It does not occur to these people that there might be weapons on the big list that are only there because they've always been there, and that, in fact, their choice of weapon could be a bad choice. Their character...
Okay, so the reason why I wanted to start with this, Matt Koville does not understand how weapons work, and this is a problem. I am not some kind of combat expert. I have a little bit of martial arts experience, none of which involves weapon fighting. It involves weapon kata, but not actual weapon combat. I've never done HEMA, but what I have done is I've read a lot on how weapons work. I've read a lot on how weapons are forged and the history of arms and armor over a period of time. The idea that a weapon does not have any kind of impact on the amount of damage being put out is complete nonsense. There's a reason why warfare evolved from big dudes hitting each other with sticks into what it is today. And that reason is we discovered more and more efficient ways to deal serious amounts of damage that also corresponds with discovering more and more ways to reduce that damage through innovations in armor. So that's why there are so many different varieties of weapon out there. They all have different roles that they serve on the battlefield, and they all impart different kinds of damage, different levels of damage. They're all designed for very specific reasons. Koville does not understand this, or at least does not seem to understand this. He seems to think that weapons exist basically just to they're essentially finishing moves in wrestling. You use the pole arm for the same reason that Shawn Michaels uses the sweet chin music, because it looks cool and fits his character, I guess. You know, even the finishing move comparison is not a good one, because there is a psychological reason in wrestling why certain wrestlers pick certain finishing moves, or at least there should be. Al Snow has a great video out there about that, but lest we get off on a wrestling tangent without B-dubs present, let's leave that aside here. This is the mindset that Koville is bringing to the table. He does not understand why different weapons would do different damage. He doesn't understand why a dagger and a longsword do different things. He doesn't understand why a two-handed sword does different things than a one-handed sword. He doesn't understand the variance in pole arms. He doesn't understand the reason why you would use a warhammer versus a rapier or a glaive. There's all of these different reasons why you would bring certain weapons to the table, and why, especially in old school D&D, it was good for characters to carry multiple weapons so that they had a variety of solutions to different problems. Having different weapons is having different solutions. Combat's a puzzle just as much as any other puzzle. It's a matter of understanding what kind of damage output you can deal when you've got a variety of weapons. You have a ranged weapon to deal with things that are outside of your melee reach. You've got a sword to deal with things that are close up. You've got a pole arm to keep things at a distance but still do melee. There's all kinds of different solutions for weapons, and yeah, it's a war game. In case you didn't realize, this comes from war games. That's where the role-playing game evolves out of, is wargaming. So that this was understood early on, and it has not been understood by subsequent designers. Our friend Jeffro Johnson here, if I scroll up back to where he entered this conversation, RPGs after Gygax are all a scam. I can't disagree with that, because it seems like post Gygax, designers have only gotten worse and worse at understanding how certain aspects work, because we've gotten away from actually understanding combat and weapons and how these things would function on a field of battle. That's why I love channels like Scalagrim, or in the past Shadiversity. I know he's gone down a different kind of path recently. I don't care so much about AI art anymore, Shad, and no one else does either. But that's why I love channels like that, because it explains how these weapons were deployed in real life. And as Jeffro points out here, strength, swing damage / thrust damage, weapons modify secondary attributes. Yeah. So yes, your weapons are modifying the applications that you have for them. Strength has an impact on how well you can hit with certain weapons. But at the end of the day, if you don't have good edge geometry, or any edge geometry at all, if you're just hitting someone with a stick versus with an axe, the axe is going to do more damage because there's a blade and edge geometry that allows for cutting. So again, this is a tangent, but it's important to understand that Matt Koville does not have a good understanding of this fundamental reality of fantasy role-playing, and that is the arms and armor of the medieval period and the Renaissance period that find their way into medieval fantasy, because he's playing in the medieval fantasy sandbox. I can also tell you from other videos that he's made in the past, he does not have a good understanding of modern combat either. And, does this guy look like he knows a lot about guns? But, anyway, let's move beyond this and let's take a look at the most recent video that he put out on his channel. And that is the video talking about the power roll. This is what we're all here to see. Lovely face. I love how I'm always able to find these Koville faces. They're interesting. Jeffro makes another good point here. Role-playing games didn't evolve from war games. They devolved into non-games. It really is a devolution. I think that's a point that a lot of people underrate there, is role-playing games have not been made better by their divorce from wargaming. In a lot of ways, they've been made worse, especially the ones that still have the trappings of wargaming in their DNA. I'm talking specifically about Dungeons and Dragons post-2000. So yeah. Let's take a look at this power roll video. This is discussing the core mechanic of the MCDM RPG, the nameless MCDM RPG. If you recall from the videos that we watched last time, Matt Koville has done away with the to hit roll and is now touting this idea of roll 2d6 for damage, add a modifier to it, and that's what you do in a combat round. So let's take a look at how this is kind of tested with his audience.
Hey folks, Matt Koville here. What is going on? It has been many moons since last we spoke and much has changed. Big things, little things. The dice are still the same, but what they do has changed quite dramatically. That's a real word. It means drastically and dramatically. Dramatically. Don't bother looking that up. Just trust me. And hey, everybody, we had our first official playtest using our new proprietary VTT, our own virtual tabletop, thanks to our partners at DM Hub. It is amazing. They can implement our rules faster than we can design them, which is very nice. I just thought y'all would like to know the VTT is real. It is happening. You can already make a character. Well, you can't. We can make characters, pick an ancestry, kit, class, initiative works, and just everything. It is amazing. I can't wait for y'all to get your hands on it. In the meantime, yes, we have monkeyed with the dice and how they work. Some of you will really like it. Some of you will hate it. And some...
Before we get into that, I started with that VTT talk for a reason. I could have skipped over all of this, but I wanted you guys to see the mention of the VTT. This was one of the things that Crafty and I discussed with Malachi back in December. Even though this game doesn't have a name or a set of mechanics, they are already building a VTT for it. After watching this video, I believe there's a reason for it, but we will get to that in just a little bit. Let's continue listening to him talk about this mechanic.
Some of you will be like, yeah, we'll see. I'm going to explain how it works and, more importantly, why it works the way it does. But before we get stuck in, I want to let you all know.
Jump ahead just a little bit.
Sorts of reasons. And you can't really tell if a game is good just from one test like this. One session or even one adventure isn't enough. You can tell if it's bad, absolutely. But people will give a game a good grade just because it's new and not obviously broken. People will give a game a good review just because they're excited to be part of the playtest. So one of the things we do is we sort of read between...
Or people will give a good review because you are YouTube famous. But let's continue.
...in the lines. And we look for feedback where we can tell, yes, that is a problem. No one else is complaining about this, but that one person is making a really good point about what this will feel like after weeks or months. Remember, we use feedback to inform, development. The feedback is not in charge for a lot of reasons, including people do not all agree about which parts of the game are good or fun or even comprehensible. I've written a lot of rule books. I've read a lot of rule books, and I think it is basically impossible to write a rule book that literally everyone understands perfectly the first time they read it. Sometimes you need to play the game a few times before a rule finally makes sense. It's weird, but that's the way it is. Basically, the rule book is the map, and as we...
He actually makes a good point here, and I want to actually give him credit there. What he's saying is some rules only make sense once you get them to the table, or some rules only come together in your mind once you get them to the table. This is why this kind of plague of no games is such a problem. There are a lot of people who don't play games. They read games, but they don't play them. You can't really get a proper understanding of how your rules are going to work until you actually field test them. Praxis is just as important as theory. And a lot of you guys are making good points here about Koville. The YouTube sing-song delivery is, in fact, pretty annoying. Matt Koville has, in his presentation, devolved into, as someone else here put, a Reddit bobblehead. I want to give credit where credit's due here, because I did not come up with that. I saw that here in chat. But yeah, I mean, like this is bad. Here it is, King Yellow. Koville really is a Reddit bobblehead. Yes, unfortunately, yes. He's using these. He's using this like overly emotive style, and Crafty actually makes a good point here. Crafty got blocked by Matt Koville on Twitter for giving feedback. So yeah, Koville does not want feedback, and I think this is his diplomatic way of saying, I don't care what you think, to a lot of the people out there. He's not going to come on his channel and tell his audience this was not popular. He's going to say, you know, some people liked some aspects of it and some people didn't, but you can't really judge everyone's criticism the same way. I think if we read between the lines, we can see that this is more negative feedback than he was expecting to these mechanics, even from his people. Yeah, like John Mollison says here, he's preaching to his choir who loves it. And that's a point I will get to once we actually get into this mechanic here. Let's see if we can get a little bit further. Yes. And Jeffro, unfortunately, it's not just Koville. Like this is the way, like this is the millennial late Gen X writing speak that has so infected these spaces that we occupy. These people don't talk like adults. They speak like teenagers. And the older they get, the more cringe and just awful it gets. And the more they seem to devolve into teenagers, honestly. Like if we take a good, honest look at the way these people communicate, it's not good. These aren't serious people. So let's keep watching.
We have discussed, the map is not the territory. Anyway, the feedback was wide-ranging, but for this video, we're just talking about the core 2d6 plus X, usually plus 2, die roll. Lots of people, including us, challenged the idea of everyone always adding the same plus X to the roll. We talked about that a lot. Why not just cut that plus X? Well, this isn't a video about that, but the shorthand answers are player psychology and math. Rolling a 2 on 2d6 feels worse than rolling a 2 when you know you get to add plus 2 or whatever. Also, that plus X gives us a little cushion that makes the math work better for rolls with a penalty. So, what did folks like about the old die roll? Well, they liked rolling 2d6. Feels good. Sure, folks would like lots of different die rolls, but most people reported that they liked knowing everything they did was just roll 2d6. This may surprise you, but a lot of folks don't enjoy fishing for a specific polyhedral in their ginormous dice bag. They like knowing it's my turn, grab my attack dice, which are always the same.
Couple things about that. Firstly, rolling a 2 feels bad. Get used to hearing that. Matt Koville cares a lot about things, quote unquote, feeling bad. He's designed his entire game around not wanting things to feel bad. But on this point about people like knowing what they have to roll, yes, people do like knowing what they have to roll. People like knowing that they get to roll a d20 whenever they attack or perform an action, or 2d6, or a d100, or whatever it is. Every good game gives you an idea of what you have to roll when you want to perform a certain action. Some games complicate this a little bit. Savage Worlds is a good example. Savage Worlds, you've got different die types that you roll for different attributes, and you kind of raise and lower die types based on, you know, how trained you are in certain skills. But still, it's on your sheet. What dice do you roll? And what I think he's getting at here, because Koville cut out the attack roll, like we mentioned, Koville cut out the attack roll, and he'll mention this in the video because it feels bad to roll a die and realize that you are going to, quote unquote, miss your turn. So the 2d6 is damage, or at least it was damage. This was you rolling damage on your attack and then adding a modifier to it, and that's how much damage you do. So you just roll damage and then compare it to the hit points, or it's not the mechanic anymore, but basically the attack roll was gone. There's no armor class to hit. It's just, you know, rolling damage, comparing it to, I guess, comparing it to armor score for damage reduction. But anyway, that's gone now. People know what they roll for damage in traditional role-playing games too. Lest you forget, it's on your sheet. And a lot of people do forget. It's something that you have to kind of drill into your players' heads. Even if it takes, you know, take the dice, take your damage dice, set it next to the weapon on your character sheet. And that's, you know, you hit with the attack, roll. Yeah. Roll that dice. That dice, that's, you know, that D8 that you put next to your longsword, roll it. Like Jeffers said, players don't deserve to take a turn. If you miss, you miss. You know, that... Sorry, if you miss, you miss. Anyway, let's keep watching. Let's see what more that he has to say here.
So yeah, we could go with 2d8 or 3d6, and folks would probably like that. But the point I'm making is that 2d6 just felt good to folks, and we pay attention to that stuff. No one was really complaining about 2d6. Folks liked the crit. That is pretty much a universal positive. Getting an extra action, as opposed to just bonus damage, gives the players way more opportunities to do cool stuff, including strategize about what they should do, and that furthers the sense of teamwork. No one misses the attack roll. Huge surprise. This is one of those things I think we already knew just from our own internal testing, but it's nice knowing that everyone else feels the same way. Folks really, really did not like everybody basically doing the same damage. Now that...
Let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to that, because that's getting into the next point. Based on what he's saying after this, I don't believe that no one missed the attack roll. Just based on what he is about to say, and we'll watch it here in just a second. This is framing, in my opinion. I'm not in the Discord. I'm not in his Patreon, so I don't know. I don't know what the community's reaction was to it. And honestly, I don't know anyone who is in there. So, you know, I don't... I don't know for sure how people reacted to this. But based on what he's about to say, I sincerely doubt that people didn't miss the attack roll. So let's back this up a little bit.
About what they should do, and that furthers the sense of teamwork. No one misses the attack roll. Huge surprise. This is one of those things I think we already knew just from our own internal testing, but it's nice knowing that everyone else feels the same way. Folks really, really did not like everybody basically doing the same damage. Now that automatically is a problem. They like rolling 2d6 for various reasons. They don't like that everyone is doing the same damage. Even a little kobold, 2d6? It's a problem D20 doesn't have because D20 splits the difference. The attack die, always the same. That's nice. People like knowing what is expected of them on their turn. Oh, it's my turn. I don't even know what I'm going to do yet, but I know I need my D20. It's part of the ritual, right? It's my turn, grab the D20. I'm going to say this again because it is important. People like knowing what is expected of them. Now, we cut the D20 attack roll for a lot of reasons, and instead we have 2d6. But that 2d6 is a damage roll. So this is the tension. This is the problem we spent weeks trying to solve. People like knowing what's expected of them, and we like that. So on your turn, you should know which dice to grab. And we like 2d6 because it gives us a nice spread. Your mom gives us, shut up. A single damage die, like a d8, you are just as likely to roll a 1 as an 8, even though one of these results is 8 times greater than the other.
Okay, let's stop right there. So, people didn't like that everyone does the same damage, regardless of weapon, regardless of their, like you said, even a little kobold, 2d6 damage. This is why you can't just start chopping things out, especially when you don't understand why they were put there in the first place. This is, Koville has torn down Chesterton's fence and discovered that it turns out it was keeping chaos at bay. Because the variance in damage that's done is important. It's important, not just, that you attack and deal damage. The amount of damage has to be proportionate to the size of the attacker, their strength modifier, and the kind of weapon that they're using. It doesn't make sense for a kobold with a short sword to do the same amount of damage as, a dragon's claw attack, or a barbarian with a great axe, or what have you. It doesn't make sense. It does not make any sense at all. And I think he's discovering this. And that's what's wild about these videos is you're seeing him struggle over the obvious answer. And the obvious answer is you shouldn't have gotten rid of the attack roll. And you should have separate types of damage or separate damage dice dealt by either certain classes or certain weapons, however you want to parse that out, however you want to abstract that. You can't just have everyone do the same damage. And you need the attack roll. You need those things split up with each other. So let's continue.
Surely that means it should at least be a little less likely to come up. And from this, we get the swinginess that I believe contributes to slog. And that's why we went with at least 2 dice. 1 die, the best result is just as likely as the worst. 2 or more dice, well, now the extreme results have the most unlikely outcomes. This is good, we think. So remember when I said everybody liked the 2d6 and you thought, well, they would like 3d6 or 2d10? Yes, we know. But it doesn't matter which dice everyone's rolling, even if it was 3d6 or 2d12. It doesn't matter what the damage roll is. If everyone's rolling those dice, even tiny kobold, well, that is stupid. It's just as stupid as the linear results of a single die. So
then why did you do it in the first place? This is self-evident on its face. Like, obviously this was a bad idea. Obviously this was a bad idea. So why even start from this premise? We just need to keep going.
So everyone rolling the same dice, yes,
here.
we like that. We like knowing what is expected of us on our turn. No attack die. We like that.
No, we don't.
We do not like the do I get to take a turn die. Everyone doing the same damage? That's dumb. It feels pretty insolvable. Unsolvable? Inalienable? Unalienable? We knew this could be a problem, but we optimistically thought that
we're gonna jump forward.
We needed bigger and bigger damage bonuses just to differentiate all the different kinds of weapons.
And back a little bit.
Light weapon kit means 2d6 plus a little. But it wasn't enough. We want to support lots of different kinds of heroes, and doing it all just by adding different bonuses to 2d6 wasn't working. We needed bigger and bigger damage bonuses just to differentiate all the different kinds of weapons and heroes, and at that point, it's not that random anymore. 15 damage plus 2d6, the 2d6 just becomes an afterthought. We tried a version of the game where every attack used a different damage die, like a d8 for medium weapons and a d6 for psionic powers, but it made everything worse. For all the reasons I said, rolling a 1 on a 1d8 felt really bad when it was the only thing you did on your turn. Worse than rolling 2 on 2d6. For reasons...
Yes. It felt bad. Again, yeah, obviously it felt bad. No one likes rolling a 1. That's RNG, buddy. Them's the dice, as they say. You're playing a game with a random chance element. By the way, combat has a random chance element. You don't always hit when you swing a sword in real life. You don't always hit what you're aiming at with a firearm. Taking this away, you still have, like Arn Man is saying here, it's so much better to only roll a 2 than to roll a 1. Yeah. You still have a lowest result and a highest result. You've just changed what those results are. You've just changed the numbers of them. Is rolling a 1 so odious that you have to completely... you have to completely throw out established, not tradition, but like essentially scientific theory on how these games work? This is like, I don't understand what he's doing here. And like Crafty says here in chat, you have to feel bad time and time again so that when you feel good, it feels really good. Failure is a very important aspect of role-playing games because you fail until you succeed. I was talking about this in Basic Experts Gilded server today, and I've made this analogy before, but when you watch the movie Die Hard, what you are seeing is a fighter in a dungeon failing rolls over and over again, but succeeding in just a few key places so that he survives and comes out the other side. John McClane fails more rolls than he succeeds at, but we watch him fail continuously until he gets those magical successes. And when he succeeds tremendously. And you have these high moments. It's the heat spot. Again, to bring up the wrestling analogy. When you see a heel beating up on a babyface, that's the majority of the match, is the heel getting heat on the babyface so that the babyface can come back and shine. Because the crowd's going to see this guy get beat up over and over again until finally he's able to pull out some last-minute trick and is able to kind of turn the tides on the heel and get the heel on the back foot, and now he's fighting back. He's coming from behind. And that raises the emotional level. That's the psychology of wrestling. That's the psychology of action movies. And that's what's created by having a null result or a failure result in role-playing games. Is, yeah, not every time are you going to succeed. Every now and then you're going to get knocked down. It's when you get back up and you make that swing and you finally hit that orc between the eyes. That's your high spot right there. You fail until you succeed. That's Yeah, that's what it's all about there. And like Macho Mandolf is saying, other things that happen on your turn: you draw enemy weapon attacks, some hit and some miss. You get spells cast on you, both good and bad, and many more. Yeah. So let's keep watching here.
Reasons that are entirely down to player psychology. And we got the crazy swinginess back that we thought we'd resolved. Really, the problem, as I see it, was we threw out the attack roll and went with 2d6. And those two different things became conflated in our, or at least my, mind. We were so excited by how well no attack roll worked that we sort of assumed we could make 2d6 damage work. So it seemed like we had something and could move on. But testing showed the truth. Everyone loved no attack roll. They liked knowing which dice to roll in their turn. They do not love everybody basically does the same damage. They liked the crit on a 12. We thought about tons of other crit options, and we tested several of them. They all had flaws, including just, this feels weird. We talked about throwing out the crit, but people love the crit. James and I met, and we talked all this out, and we could not think of a good solution. The real problem, the fundamental problem was, how do we let everybody roll 2d6? Keep the crit on a 12 and differentiate damage rolls. Have our cake and eat it too. James got there before me. I wrote a long message in our Discord laying out all of the above, just trying to define the problem and sum over everything we knew
the
and
actual
had learned.
mechanic.
I woke up the next morning to an equally long message from James in which he proposed the following. Your roll, your 2d6 plus X roll, is the input to a chart. And the chart tells you what happens. Different weapons, different heroes, means different charts. Same roll, infinite variety of results. You, hearing this, are probably imagining something way more complicated than what James was proposing. I immediately, and with undisguised glee, shouted, like Rollmaster? An RPG I quite liked. But I knew he didn't mean that. He referenced another indie RPG, Apocalypse World, that has a mechanic like this. He wasn't proposing we use that mechanic. He didn't think it would work for our game, but it was an example of an RPG that did something like this, and therefore could serve as proof of concept that the idea is not fundamentally flawed in some way.
Here we go. Apocalypse World. Apocalypse World has entered the stew here. Apocalypse World is awful. Like, there's no getting around it. I once had a player describe Apocalypse games as make a wish, roll a d10 to see if it comes true. Yeah. Jeffro makes a point here. Rocky 2, but without Rocky getting whooped by Mr. T during Act 2. But this is what we are... This is what we're looking at now. We've moved from the attack roll's gone. You just roll straight damage, add a modifier, compare results to armor or something like that. Now we have a chart. There's a not as complicated chart. It's a 3-line chart. There is a lesser success, a medium success, and a high success. And then there's a fourth option, the crit, when you roll boxcars. That's what we have now. So Koville will go on to explain that, it's not as complicated as it seems because there's always, the same ranges. It's always the same range for lesser result, medium result, high result, and crit. However, there are different effects that go along with that, including different damage numbers. And those damage numbers do not correspond to what you roll in the dice. They're, I guess, arbitrary. There's also different effects that go along with it. So let's let him explain it and then kind of dig into this.
Might not be right for us, but could work. By the end of his post, you could see him working out as he went, he had refined the idea down to the following. This is a sample heroic ability.
Okay. So let's take a look at this as our example, like we do here. Concussive Slam. It's a psionic ability. 5-space range, targets one creature or object. If you roll a 2d6 or 2 through 6, your damage is 3. 7 to 9, your damage is 5. 10 plus, your damage is 7. And the effect is slide the target up to 4 squares. So I guess you get to do that regardless of what you roll. but there's more damage added on. And then with a crit, I guess you get, your extra action, I believe, is the reward for the crit in this system. So this is what we're working with here. While Koville will go on to say that, yes, you can always expect a similar range for all of these abilities. You still have to look at this chart every time you do an attack, every time you take an action. Apparently, every time you use a skill, he'll go on to talk about how he wants to implement this in skills as well. You need to know these things. That's a lot to memorize, even if you just rely on a handful of favorite powers that you use. That's a lot of information to keep in your brain. So let's keep going and see how he addresses this.
You can see the ability has a name. It's got keywords. It tells you it's a psionic power, so you know it's a talent ability. It's got range, what the legal targets are, and then you can see there's the power chart. It's got 3 results. They all have 3 results, and the differences are just how much damage you do. And then regardless of what you get an effect, which is push people back for concussive slam. James was proposing every combat ability your character has, so not general abilities like a talent's telepathy, would include a chart like this. We would all be rolling the same 2d6, but we could all have very different characters with very different weapons and therefore different and appropriately different damage results. Under this model, your choice of kit would modify your damage on this chart. This solved all our problems. Now, you might not recognize this. James didn't, but I did. This is the same idea from one of my favorite beer and pretzel games, Epic Spell Battles, aka Epic Spell Wars of the Battle Wizards Duel at Skullfire Mountain. It's a card game where you build spells out of up to 3 cards from your hand. Each spell has a subject, a quality, and a destination. You can use these in any combination to create unique, not literally unique, but you get the idea, spells. It was awesome and funny for me to see James pitch this because I really believed we could steal casting spells like this for the MCDM wizard or mage. Sort of the kind of thing Ars Magica implies. The fact that a card game does this tricked me into thinking we could do it, but I couldn't make it work. We already know too much about our game. Any new system has to serve the existing masters, and I couldn't get this idea to check all the boxes we needed. So I laughed out loud to see some design from this game show up, just not the design I was trying to steal. As a fan of this game, I was excited. This is a really powerful idea, I said. There was a ton of stuff we could hang on the power roll. But first, having played Epic Spell Battles, I said, the chart needs to be the same for every power and every character. I think James already knew that. I'm not sure he ever considered anything else, but it was something I noticed playing Epic Spell Battles. The chart is always 1 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 plus. The results on the right are all different and idiosyncratic, but the numbers on the left are always the same. And I think I know why. It means every time somebody rolls, everyone at the table knows what the numbers on their chart says, even if they can't actually read the card because they're sitting too far away. So they always know. If you got a 9, everyone at the table knows you almost got the best result. That has a huge impact on play. The result.
Okay. So what we're talking about here, and Arn Man kind of beat me to it here. The 2d6 as, being 2 die 6 have basically been rendered irrelevant. You could do this with 1d6. You probably do it better with 1d6, honestly. It's less complicated. You've reduced a 2d6 curve to 3 results. Technically 4, because crit is also a result. But yeah, every action is a magic card at this point, as Jeffro is saying here in chat. At this point, I have to question now why 2d6 is still, important. Why not 1d6 at this point? It's not a direct damage roll anymore. The fact that there's a 1 versus a 2 really has no bearing on what goes on, because if you roll super low at this point, there's still something that happens. There's not a null result. So what does it matter if you roll a 1? You're still going to deal a certain amount. He has mastered the art of going around his elbow to get to his asshole, is the best way to put it. He is so determined not to just do things the way that makes sense. He's got to do it this weird, kooky Koville way because that's what he's committed to at this point. And it doesn't make... Yeah. 2 through 4 and 10 through 12 on a 2d6 are literally the same probabilities as 1 and 6 on 1d6. That's from Likely Arrow here in chat. At this point, yes. And King Yellow makes a good point here. There's only good, better, best results. Yeah. And that's what we're dealing. And Jeffro, he'll go on to say this. The reason why he doesn't want to make each card a completely different chart is, he says, to reduce the cognitive load, but I don't see the cognitive load being reduced the way that he's doing this. Anyway, it doesn't... This is extremely clunky. This is not a good system. Let's keep watching.
Results on the right can and should be different and unique, but the numbers on the left of the chart should always be the same. Now, I can tell you, this is literally working. We had a playtest last Friday. The people in the playtest were either new or it had been months since they had played. And I watched one player say, okay, I got a 7. And another player said, wait, you got a 7? I got a trigger that will give you +1. They knew for a fact that +1 would boost their teammates' result into the next tier, because even though they had no idea what this other player was trying to do, they knew 7 was just 1 away from the tier 2 result. That is really powerful, knowing for a fact that if I give you +1 to this right now, it will make a difference.
So that's why all the card ranges are the same, to answer Jeffro's question, to give that sense of, every time someone rolls a 7, you know that you can, a +1 would bump this into the next tier. Or every time someone rolls a 9, it would bump this up into tier 3. So it gives the opportunity for, you don't have to understand every player's individual chart at that point, which... Again, it makes sense, but how did we get here? Let's keep watching.
And the reverse is also true. Oh, you got a 5 or a 6? Well, I'll save my trigger. That is a big deal. It also helps with what we call the cognitive load. How much shit do we expect the average player to hold in their head? If every ability in the game could have unique ranges, players and directors would go insane. There'd be no real way to know, is that good? Just looking at the die roll. Now, obviously, the cognitive load is even lower when it's just 2d6 and that's the damage you did. But we tried that, and it led here. I can't tell you how many problems this solved. Using 2d6 as just a straight damage roll meant we had to inflate everybody's hit points up to what seemed like stupid high levels. That didn't bother us. It's all relative. Fights would play out the same way, but it sure felt weird. Now, folks would get used to that. There is precedent, but this lets us bring things back down to normal. As soon as I saw what James had posted, my brain started fizzing. I immediately, that day, prototyped the Elementalist using the new power chart. I'd already been working on the Elementalist, but this is what I needed to get really excited by it. I saw enormous possibilities for this. You could have a spell where the effect is always the same, but the chart sets the target number to resist. Or the spell always does the same damage, but the results tell you how big the area is or how many targets you affect. You could use the chart to tell you how tough the undead you summon are. You could have kits like a light weapon kit that does more damage when you roll badly. That's probably a stupid idea, but maybe not. You could have magic items that add an effect to any roll of any power if you get 10 or better. Or artifacts that add like a fourth tier, like 13 plus to your existing powers. I can't even put all the ideas and possibilities here. There are too many. After testing this a few times with a few different people, we felt like it was working, but we knew there were challenges with this solution. It was powerful and exciting, and we thought fun, but it wasn't perfect. You, hearing this, have already thought of everything I'm about to say. A lot of people, when they hear this, they imagine looking it up is a lot more complicated than it really is. There's just 3 results. The numbers are always the same. You very quickly learn what the rolls mean. You know, when you get a 7, you just missed tier 2. After a couple of rolls,
I think Koville is overestimating the average player's ability to hold that information in their heads. And I am not table averse. I will say that. I don't hate tables. I like tables. Tables can be fun. They can create some interesting situations in gameplay. But with all the different variations on what the table could mean, whether it's spells or weapons or abilities, he even mentioned skills at some point. There's a whole bunch of different variations on what these numbers actually mean when you roll them. Everyone knows that it's good, better, best. Or good, better, best, crit. Yeah. Like Jeff was saying, he's designing a game for non-gamers. And we'll get to I'm going to put a pin in that for just a second. And yeah, I agree with Chance here. Only GM should have to reference more than a few. I agree with that as well. And that's one of the reasons why, even though I like the chaotic nature of DCC Magic, I understand a lot of people look at it and immediately go, nope, not for me. Not for me. Because it's a lot. And there's a table for every spell. But all of these abilities have different things that go along with the table. The table doesn't do the same thing every single time. People still have this cognitive load and they'll still have to look it up. Your average gamer is not going to be able to keep even a few of these in your head. And so this is where I want to go back to this idea. There's not much reason to watch the rest of the video. We've already seen the meat of it. So I want to go back to something that was discussed at the beginning of the video. The VTT. We asked why a VTT was being developed for a game that didn't even have a name, much less a set idea of rules. Crafty Matt said earlier, we're 3 months after the end of the backer kit, and MCDM still hasn't figured out how PCs are going to attack monsters and vice versa. But we have a working prototype of a VTT. My theory is that this game is being designed to be run off of a VTT first and foremost. I believe that what Matt Colville wants to do here is create his own VTT with his own rule set attached to it. And yeah, he can do that if he wants to. There's nothing unethical about setting up your own VTT with your own rule set. The problem is, like Crafty's saying here, the video game designer is designing a video game. Shocking. Yeah, this is being sold as a tabletop role-playing game. It is being developed like it's a video game. And a video game where the mechanics really aren't... they're not as clever as the designer thinks they are. But all of this cognitive load is going to be it's going to be handled more easily by a computer, where when you roll that certain number, it's able to pull, okay, you rolled this for this ability, and so it has this effect, and it automatically applies it. You don't have to look it up. You don't have to apply it. It applies the damage number if there's damage and the effect that's created by that ability. All of that is handled by the engine of the VTT. That's a video game. If your game only technically works on, the tabletop and relies very heavily on the VTT to do a lot of this kind of heavy lifting, how are you competing with Wizards of the Coast at this point? Because that's what WotC's doing. WotC is building a VTT first game. They are building a game that's designed to keep you in a digital ecosystem. So are you. Why should I go with your virtual ecosystem when the whole problem is I don't want to be in one at all. And maybe some people want to be in Matt Colville's digital ecosystem. I'm sure there are people out there, and actually not even sure, I know there are people out there who prefer kind of the digital experience of gaming because it takes away the cognitive load from them. They don't have to worry about knowing the rules, knowing how the effects work. They just click a macro and a thing happens on the screen in front of them. This is not going to kill WotC's VTT, though. This is not going to kill 1D&D, because 1D&D is outspending them. 1D&D has the crazy graphics and the Unreal Engine and all that stuff behind it. It's going to be a feast for the eyes. It's not going to be very mechanically deep. It's going to be kind of a weird video game, but not really video game experience. But so is this. It's just not going to look as good as the one that WotC has. And what I'm trying to get at here is this is not what people... I don't think this is what people were looking for out of this game. I think people were looking for a tabletop role-playing game. Even people in Colville's audience. I have to imagine there are people who put a lot of money into this campaign who are now feeling a little bit of disappointment in the pit of their stomach that this game is slowly but surely morphing into something that's going to require a VTT if it's going to be played in kind of the fast-paced method that Colville has promised. Arnman said this earlier. Colville is first and foremost a salesman. That's what he's doing. And as a salesman, he's good. He is good at selling to his audience. Something I have noticed throughout the course of this video is that his audience does not have a lot of overlap with my audience. A lot of us find this shtick grating and annoying. But his people like him, and they like his presentation style, and they like his kind of shuck and jive that he does in his videos. They like this presentation style. I'm gonna bring up something here real quick. This is something that occurred to me a few weeks ago. I was talking to Wonky about this, trying to kind of understand the character of Matt Colville. So I'm going to bring up an image here. Bear with me for a second. Some of you may recognize this character. Many of you probably don't. This is a fairly obscure DC Comics character. This is the Funky Flashman. Funky Flashman was created by Jack Kirby to tell Stan Lee where to go and what to kiss after he left Marvel Comics. Funky Flashman is all about the hype and the presentation, and he has this kind of hip happening look. And let me see if I can find it. I'm not finding the panel right now, but the joke about Funky Flashman is at the end of the day, he goes back to his house. He takes off his toupee, he takes off his fake beard, and he takes off his sunglasses and sets him on a mannequin head. This is Matt Colville. Matt Colville is the Funky Flashman of role-playing games. He is ultimately selling you a bill of goods. He has told you his project will be one thing, and it's going to be something completely different. He... Again, I'm not accusing him of scamming people. I think Matt Colville has just gone back to what he knows best. And I think expecting him to do anything other than what he knows best was foolish. I think a lot of people have been taken in by him. And I think that what Matt Colville is doing here is ultimately setting up his audience to be extremely disappointed. They're going to be disappointed with what's delivered here. And ultimately what's going to be delivered is a bastard offspring of Apocalypse World and 4th edition that's going to require, in all but name, a VTT to work. You know, you can play it on the tabletop, but it's really designed to be played. It's designed to be played in a VTT. Like Crafty says here, he didn't scam people. He wants to make the game, but he doesn't know how. And now we've given a 13-year-old $3 million to play with. Here's another example. Again, we keep coming back to wrestling. Matt Colville is Tony Khan. Matt Colville has been given more money than he knows what to deal with. He has been given he's been given the expectations of people who have been burned by the major companies and major offerings out there. But ultimately, he is in over his head and does not know what he's doing. But he's going to sell his ass off. And he's going to continue to push this dream. He's going to continue to push this fantasy of what his game is on people. The fact of the matter is this game, it's... I hesitate to call it the Fire Fest of role-playing games, but that's, you know, that's kind of what we have here. You're thinking you're going to get this massive festival with Blink-182 and Major Lazer, and you're going to have your, you know, fancy glamping tent or, you know, whatever it was that Billy promised to people. But you're going to get there and you'll have a hurricane tent and a grilled cheese sandwich and all the bands canceled. That's what you're going to get with this thing. Because what he's promised he can't pull off. His ego has written a check that his body cannot cash. And again, Crafty Matt makes a good point here. He is flush with cash, for those of you who have watched Parks and Rec. And he mentions this in his video that he's staffing up. I skipped over that part, but he mentions all the hires that he's made, you know, as the money has come in. Hyperborea was made by one guy. Axe was made by one guy. Original Dungeons and Dragons was made by two guys. Maybe one guy. Depends on who you ask. By the way, if it was made by one guy, it was Gygax. Sorry, Griff. But I don't see the reason why you have to staff this thing up like it's a video game unless you're actually making a video game. It's an RPG. All you have to do is work with, you know, artists and yourself and, you know, maybe one other collaborator. It doesn't require an entire development team like a video game does. And so this is what we're left with. We have a video game designer who's ultimately going to make a video game. And so, for any of you who are watching, who are still in the Koville camp, I'd prepare for disappointment. This is not going to revolutionize the tabletop world because, quite simply, it's not a tabletop game. It's a video game. It's a video game built upon hopes and dreams and duct tape. And really, that's all there is to it. I'll be curious to see how things develop, but from where we're standing right now, I wouldn't be surprised if all of the I wouldn't be surprised if all of the subsequent updates are more additional mechanics that will require the computational power of the VTT to really pull off and accomplish. And again, 3 months in, we do not have a set method by which attacks are conducted. We do not have a set core mechanic. All we have is a commitment to using 2d6. That's what we have. We don't have a name. We've got some ideas that he seems to believe are set in stone, but based on the way things are going, I don't even know that those are set in stone. Like Crafty's saying here, mechanics to fix the mechanics that are broken. This thing is going to be a monstrosity, and it's going to be a catastrophic failure. And I don't see any way around that. I don't see how he lands this plane. So that's what we're left with. Kind of a downer note there. But that's ultimately what we're left with here is Matt Koville set out to design an RPG and has designed a video game instead. And not an exciting video game, not one that looks interesting. One that's pretending to be a tabletop game. Which, I don't know. Is that better or worse than a tabletop game pretending to be a video game? Maybe it's the same. I don't know. But that's what we're left with. That's where we are now. So with that, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. This is where we're at with MCDM. And I'm going to get castigated for doing this because I did last time I talked about Koville. This is again, Crafty making a good point here. He doesn't land the plane. He flies away like Homelander and watches it hit the ocean. Yeah. Rodrigo, it's looking like it'll be the Star Citizen of tabletop role-playing games at this rate. Honestly, I wish it weren't this way. I wish it weren't the case that the two quote-unquote big contenders for who's going to, really challenge D&D were Daggerheart and this, because Daggerheart looks like it's a complete and total non-game, and so does this. So, this is what we're left with. This is where we are now. All of our, well, not my hopes and dreams, but all of the hopes and dreams of the RPG cognoscenti were pinned on Daggerheart, MCDM RPG, and Shadowdark. Shadowdark, at least, seems good. People seem to be enjoying it. I don't know that I'll use it. And Tales of the Valiant too. I forgot about that. So yeah, Tales of the Valiant. And Rodrigo and Rube as well. I'll address you guys. I've actually never played 4E, so I can't. 4E is good or bad. I never played it. I do know that Koville is very inspired by 4E, and I guess this is the result of that inspiration. That doesn't speak very highly of 4E, but this is where we find ourselves now. This is the state of the contenders to 1D and D. No, Rube, you're right. I haven't played MCDM. Nobody has played MCDM, including, I would argue, the playtesters. They have not played MCDM. They have played what is currently being called MCDM, but based on the way that things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if all of that is just thrown out the window. Mark Genre Mixer, Swords and Wizardry is a good game. Hyperborea is a good game. The problem is that these things are built on BX. These are BX clones. And that's, the way of the future is not going to be continuous clones of BX, even with things added onto them like Hyperborea. Whatever comes next is going to have to be something different. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what that is at this point. Because we're talking about, these mechanics that we've known, these mechanics that were established in 1980 and then abandoned shortly thereafter, as Jeffro likes to point out, that's the internal combustion engine at this point. I've made this metaphor before. Again, that's the internal combustion engine. The D20 roll, add a modifier, compare to result. That's what powers the automobile from the late 19th century all the way up to today, is that same principle of internal combustion. It's been iterated on, it's been innovated on, but it's that same core mechanic, that same core principle still powers the same thing. We don't currently know what's going to replace the internal combustion engine for commercial transportation or everyday transportation. Something inevitably will, I think, but at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at a bunch of poor replacements for the internal combustion engine. And if California has any say, one of these will become the mandatory replacement for the internal combustion engine. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. In the meantime, I would say, you guys know the games that you love. Swords and Wizardry, White Box, and also WIGHT White Box. The retro clone of 0E that Basic Expert just put out. Axe, OSE, Shadow Dark. You've got games out there that you love. Keep playing those games and designing for those games and working within that ecosystem. Maybe somewhere along the way, someone is going to come up with the next big thing, the next innovation, the next killer of the D20 system. But until then, play Castles and Crusades, play Hyperborea, play AD&D 1E, play these games that already exist. don't pin your hopes on these used car salesmen like Matt Colville. And like Jeffro points out, we're just now figuring out how to play chainmail. There's still new stuff to discover in these old rule sets because there was folk knowledge based on kids kind of sort of figuring out how to play these games back in the day and then internalizing that as the right way to play. And that's how you get these that's how you get these people who say, I've been playing the game for 40 years, but they've been playing wrong for 40 years. That's why it's important to apparently I accidentally slighted Crafty, so let me give him a compliment here. RTFM. Do what Crafty says. Read the manual. Read the book. Find new things that you looked over in the past. Don't just rely on this folk knowledge of role-playing games that's been carried over. Discover for yourself what's actually in these books and become a learned RPG scholar. Because then you will understand what came before. Truly understand what came before. That is how you're going to innovate and iterate on what comes next. You have to understand what we currently have and what all this is based on. You have to go back to the foundation. You have to understand how these things were built. Like Jeffro and Crafty are saying here, we needed people to play the original editions of D&D much more than we needed people to make dumbed down variants of them. 100% agree. The original rules are now available in their entirety all over the place. They're ubiquitous. They're no longer this kind of hidden old thing that the OSR had to kind of bring back to life. And now we have access to it. So the OSR served its purpose in a lot of ways. And like Crafty says here, read the book, find others that have read the book, play the game by the book, then talk about how what you read translates to the table, go back to reading the book. That's what a lot of our best guys are doing right now. That's what Crossface does. That's what Crafty Matt does. That's what Jeffro's been doing. That's what Alchemical Raker has been doing with 5th edition. There's all kinds of guys out there who are doing this. And if I left your name off of that list, I apologize. You guys know that I love you all. Read the book, understand what's in it, and then talk about your experience. Play by the book. Let other people know how you are playing. Go back to reading the book. Continue to study and continue to become a better gamer. And maybe, just maybe, you will uncover the secret to the next paradigm of role-playing games. And then find a ginger to spread the word of the book. There we go. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be it for Rollin Bones tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for allowing me to rant at you all. This has been a rant-heavy episode, but I love it. And I love that you guys have come along with me on this ride. And Koville fans who watch this, and I'm not talking about those of you who are actually engaging in chat right now, Koville fans, listen to what I'm saying. Listen to the points that we've been making here in this episode and think about them for a second. And think about if that's really what you wanted when you signed up for it. So next week on Rollin Bones, let me check and make sure that I've got this correct. Yeah, next week on Rollin Bones, I will have John McGowan back on. We will be talking about topics to be determined. And the rest of April's already set. So the week after next, DM Blackwall will be back on. We'll talk more Horde Wars. We'll probably talk some history. And then we will end the month with what will become a reoccurring spot on the show for Wonky. Wonky is going to be joining me one episode per month moving forward for the foreseeable future. And when Wonky's on, what we're going to be talking about, we're not going to do any, like RPG news or anything like that. We're going to be talking strictly about design. We're talking about our design process. So that's where we'll be going with these regular Wonky episodes. And we've got something special planned for this first one. So next week, John McGowan. Week after that, DM Blackwall. And we're going to end April with the Wonky. So we will be we'll be back next week. I'm looking forward to it. And until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard. John, thank you so much for the congratulations. It's been a long time coming. And I'm excited to finally be there. So, guys, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you guys next time.